Are you feeling overworked, stretched too thin, like you just can't get a grasp on things? Like you keep trying and trying and trying, but it never seems to be enough. Maybe your homeschool isn't looking and feeling like you envisioned. Maybe your kids are feeling frustrated. You don't know if you're doing enough for them, and you just feel like things are falling apart around you, no matter how hard you try. You might be feeling the homeschool burnout, and it is something that can come to all of us, no matter how long we've been homeschooling, and it can affect our students as well. So today I wanted to talk about burnout as a homeschool parent and with our homeschool kids, how we can try to prevent it, and if you are in a season of feeling burnt out, how you can try to make it better. Hey guys, welcome back to My Practically Imperfect Life. My name's Abby. I'm a homeschooling mom of 2 high schoolers, and we are at the tail end of our homeschool journey. I have a senior and I have a junior, so we have been at this for quite some time. And burnout, it came to my mind because I'm on a lot of homeschool Facebook groups, and I've seen a lot of parents post about how they either are struggling with balancing multiple kids with different learning needs, or they're just struggling and they're not quite sure what to do, and so they've turned to these groups for advice. And burnout happens. It happens, that feeling of I just want to quit, I'm done. And it's happened to me at different stages in our homeschool journey. In fact, very recently I was at a place where I was done. I was completely at the end of my rope. And it wasn't so much related to stressors of homeschool, but it was just stressors in general. And I've talked about some of those things on my channel, how my job that I was at for several years, a job I loved with a schedule that worked really great with our family and our homeschool schedule, that company got sold and that job was being eliminated. And so I had to find new work. And then my husband lost his job, so I had to pick up a second job. And then I was trying to balance that with all of the things I do around the house and the stuff I do for my at-home business, and trying to homeschool my kids and trying to just maintain this level where I thought everything needed to be at. And I was at the end of my rope. I was tired, I was grouchy, I was anxious, and it was coming across in everything I did. I couldn't put 100% of myself into anything because I was stretching myself so thin. And even having been through seasons of feeling similarly in the past, I didn't stop that cycle early enough. And once I finally had to sit down and say, okay, we've got to tackle this and we've got to make changes, it took some time for me to get back to a place where I am feeling good, where I'm feeling energetic, where I feel like I'm putting my whole self into the things I'm doing again, and my family and my friends can see the difference as well. So I really wanted to make this video because, one, I get the sense from a lot of the posts that I see that people feel very alone in those situations. They feel like they're the only ones who are feeling that way as homeschool parents. Like there's, everybody else's homeschool must be perfect and working just fine. Why does mine not feel like that? Or why am I having so much trouble? And again, it's not just parents, it's students as well. Our students can go through cycles where they are feeling burnt out, where they're feeling that stress and that anxiety, and there are things we can do to try to make things better for them as well. But let's start by talking about homeschool parents and what we can do for ourselves. So I wrote down a couple of things that have helped me, things that I have gone back to each time I got to that point where I was like, oh, we need to make some adjustments here. And these are all things that I have done once again recently to get me back to a place where I felt really good about how my balance was in life and how things are going in our homeschool. So my first recommendation is to actually sit down and make a really honest list about the things that you are responsible for, the things that you are involved in, and things that you feel are causing those extra stressors in your life. I'm talking about jobs, I'm talking about volunteer hours, things that you do around the house, things that you're responsible for regularly. Are you stressed about money? Are you stressed because you're not getting enough sleep? Do you feel stressed because of maybe some health issues going on? And then look at that list and ask yourself, what can I reasonably cut or change? I had to do this as recently as this fall because I was working 3 different jobs. I was working a full-time job, a part-time job, and I've been running a business from home for many years now. And I was looking at the sheer number of hours that I was spending outside the home at those jobs. Now, I had talked that, I needed to work in order to support things for my family, but it gets to a point where you have to decide, well, what can I cut in order to be able to cut back those hours? And so it was a long conversation with my husband about what can we adjust in our budget? What things can we do without? What things can we save back differently for? So that way, one, I can cut back on the hours I'm not at home and the hours I'm out working. But two, I looked at the work that I was doing and I realized that my full-time job was causing me a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, and I was coming home from work tired, grumpy, angry, and just always complaining about it. It was not a job that filled my cup. It was a job that constantly was draining it. And that was something that I needed to change. I needed to, if I was going to be working full-time at a job, it needed to be one where I maybe not necessarily got a sense of joy every day in it because, jobs can be hard, but one where I felt more fulfillment in what I was doing. And so that was a big change that I made. I actually flip-flopped. I went full-time at a job I was part-time at, but one that makes me come home happy. I come home with good things to say about work, and I come home feeling positive about my day. And while I still do work part-time, it's very, very, very part-time, and I can set my hours and I can decide when I want to work more and when I want to work less. So I'm able to flex a lot more around the rest of my life schedule. And that has been just the most amazing blessing since I made that change. It has taken just a huge load off, even though it involved really reanalyzing our budget. It was just fantastic. And then I had to also look at my other responsibilities. I volunteer in a lot of different ways, and those are all things that really do bring me joy. Acts of service is my love language. I love to do these kind of things. But this year, I really have to focus on balance. And so it was, where can I cut back, or where can I recruit new volunteers and delegate more of the responsibilities? That way I'm still involved, but I'm not solely responsible for so many things. And so I had to really be honest when I looked at that list. As much as I wanted to say, oh yeah, I can keep doing X, Y, and Z, and I'll just make it work. Just making it work is what leads to burnout. It's making those adjustments to where you have that healthy balance of those things outside the home and in the home. So start by making a list. Talk with your spouse about where you can reasonably make some changes. I'm aware that not everybody can quit a job, and a lot of us have to work outside of the home. I have to work outside of the home, but to what extent I need to work outside of the home, that was where we are able to make some changes. And as long as we're talking about talking with your spouse, my second thing is to talk with your spouse about sharing responsibilities. If you already don't have a system in place where each of you are doing different things or maybe helping out with different things, talk to them about putting one in place. Are there certain things around the home that each of you can take responsibility for? So that way, some of that stuff that maybe you feel like, maybe you're a stay-at-home parent, you feel like it's your responsibility to take care of all of those things. No, it's everybody's home. Everybody can be chipping in. Get your kids involved. Maybe everybody can have different chores that they're doing. Everybody can have different things they're responsible for. Maybe this week somebody else can go and handle picking up the groceries. Somebody else can help with the meal prepping. Somebody else can clean this room or that room. Ask to share the load. And you can even ask to share the load in terms of homeschooling. If a spouse is out working during the day and they can't be there to help teach your kids, maybe they can sit down and help you grade stuff in the evening. If there's a math assignment your student did during the day and you need to go through and check it, hand them the answer key book and the math assignment and ask them to go through and grade it for you. So that way you have it ready to review with your student the next day. Have them sit and give your kids little quizzes over the things they learned during the day. Maybe if they have a test they're going to be ready to take, have them help do some review questions with them. It's similar in that way to what we would hope that, our counterparts in public and private school would be doing, those parents would be doing with their students. Those kids have to come home and study, and the expectation is that hopefully parents will be involved in that as well. And so you can definitely get your spouse involved in homeschooling in different ways. If they have a schedule that allows them to be home on a couple of weekdays, maybe they can help teach one or two of the lessons on that day, give you a little bit of a breather, allow you to take care of something else. So see how you can share that responsibility, both related to things around the home, but also with things related to homeschooling. Don't feel like it's just got to be on one parent. Homeschooling can be something where both of you work together. I mean, these are your children and you're raising them together. You should be involved in their education together. Even if one of you is doing the majority of the homeschooling, it can still be something that they can be a part of to whatever extent you can work it out. My third recommendation is to prioritize. If you have a lot of different things that you feel you're responsible for, you have to sit down and you got to decide which things are absolutely the most important. I have found that doing different types of lists that help me keep track of the different areas that I have responsibilities in has been really helpful. But what I do at the start of the week is I look at those individual lists and I pull the things that are my priorities for the week to what I call my power list or my must-do list. And I try to limit it so it's not too overwhelming, but those are the things that must be tackled this week. And if those are all done and if I have extra time, I'll look back to those lists and see if there's anything else I can pull. And by only looking then throughout the week at that must-do list, I feel much less overwhelmed. I know how I need to focus and use my time. And it really just takes a huge weight off. Instead of looking at this massive amount of items that are coming up or that maybe are a low priority, I'm looking at just those few things that are the ones that just have to be tackled right away. Tip number 4 is to get rid of artificial deadlines that you have created. Maybe you've said, okay, our school year is going to be done on this day, or we are going to for sure have a break on that day, or my students need to complete all of this curriculum by week number so-and-so. Just get rid of those artificial deadlines. Unless you are in a state where there are requirements for certain things to be done and turned in at a certain time, or if you have, for example, state testing that you're required to do by your state's homeschool laws, it's homeschooling, guys. We're allowed to be flexible. We've had years where we have been able to be done with our homeschool year in April, late April. We've gotten in the 180 days that our state requires. All of our curriculum is done. Fantastic. We're finished. We have also have years when we've gone all the way till the end of May. And we've had some where some curriculum is done in April and some is done much later than that. But getting rid of that feeling we must keep everything on track and everything must be going at the same pace and everything must be done at the same time. That's just an added stressor, not only for you, but also for your kids. The beauty is that if we're struggling in something or if something seems overwhelming, we can back off. We can take extra time and we can review it. We can spread an assignment out over 2 days instead of feeling like we have to finish it in one day. And so by doing that, we give ourselves that bit of grace. We allow ourselves that extra time that we need, that extra time that our students need. And then we kind of get rid of that feeling like we're being rushed. If you know that there's no set end date to this year's curriculum, then if you get done in spring, great. And if you get done right at the start of summer, great. It's just a matter of going at a pace that everybody feels comfortable with, picking up the pace when you want to, slowing down the pace when you need to. Now, I may have lost count, but I think I'm on tip number 5, and that one is to plan ahead. I have long been a planner. I love feeling like, hey, I know what's going to be going on and roughly when it's going to be happening. Like in the summer, I take all of my homeschool curriculum and I do a rough outline of the school year. I'll list down the different lessons, the different assignments and everything, and I'll put them into my planner system. But I won't assign them necessarily to exact dates because, again, I want to have that flexibility. But it is nice to have kind of a list of all of the things that we're going to tackle over the course of the year, and then I can adjust those. Again, if I want to spread something out over a couple days, if I want to take a day off of a subject, I can do that. But at least I have a rough idea of how the school year will play out. And then usually in about 6 to 8 weeks blocks, I do some really significant planning. I give myself an afternoon on a weekend and I go through and I pull books, I pull experiment supplies, I make copies of the things I need to. I look ahead at topics we're going to be covering, make myself some notes on things that I think might be a little more difficult for my students, that I'm going to probably want to spend a little more time on. If there's something that they've been struggling with, I'll see if we need to do some like remedial learning or some review on those things. And that has been really helpful because then going into that 6 or 8 week block, I have nothing I have to prep. It's all done and ready for those upcoming weeks. And we can just go right into our homeschool day and feel like we have it all ready to go. And then again, as we get close to the end of that period, I give myself another afternoon. I plan out the next block. So by keeping it relatively, short, 6 to 8 weeks might sound like a long time, but it's really not that much to plan at once. It just really helps to break up that school year and allow me to make those adjustments as I feel they are needed with what we are doing. But giving yourself that time, it will take that huge load off of you, that feeling like every day, okay, I got to get the stuff ready for today. Or every night, oh, I got to get all this stuff ready for tomorrow. Just get it all done in these chunks. And then each night you can go to sleep and know it's already ready to go for the next day. And that has been something that's been really helpful for me. And my last tip has to do with giving yourself you time. And by you time, I don't mean just time that you're out of the house. There's been a lot of talk about that in the past about, moms deserve to have some time away from home. But time away from the home doesn't necessarily equate with, you time or self-care time. Just because I'm out of the home to go to work does not mean that is self-care time. I'm gone for work. So what is it that will help you recharge your battery? You just got to find that thing that works best for you. I enjoy reading, I enjoy Bible journaling, and I like having at least a little quiet time to kind of get myself centered, particularly at the start of my day. And so for me, that is my little power hours that I like to do in the morning. I've been getting up rather early in the morning. So yeah, it kind of, you got to make sure you go to bed early enough if you're going to get up early enough and all of that stuff. But for me, it's worth it to get up that extra hour before everybody else. I get time to sit with a cup of coffee. I do my daily devotion. I give myself about a 20-minute block to read whatever book I want to read. And a couple days a week, I'll pull out my journaling supplies. I'll do my Bible journaling. And I just feel recharged. And then after that, I dive into the stuff that I need to get done for my day. And that is it's just the right amount of time for me to feel like I've filled my cup and now I'm ready to go and pour into others for the remainder of the day. So find that thing for you. It might be going and working out. It might be going for a walk. Maybe you want to sit and listen to some music. Maybe you want to sit and binge watch your favorite show on TV. Whatever it is that you need in order to help you feel recharged. But make sure that you find a way to do that. And whether that is giving yourself, 15, 20 minutes a day and maybe some longer time a couple days a week, it's doable. We can sacrifice time from somewhere else in order to make sure that you're taken care of. I said this in nursing for many years, especially when I was a home care nurse, that you have to take care of the caregiver because the caregiver will get burnt out. And we are very much in a caregiver role as parents and as homeschool parents because we are pouring into our families, we're pouring into our homes, and we're pouring into our homeschool. And if we're not taking care of ourselves, then we aren't going to have anything to give there, or we're going to be giving basically like a shell of ourselves into each of those things. So find whatever it is you need to refill your cup every day, if possible, at least a couple of times a week if you can't do it every day. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the video, it is not just parents that can feel burnout from time to time. It can be our students as well. And this is really true whether you have a student who is homeschooled or a student who is in public or private school. That sense of burnout, that sense of feeling overwhelmed can happen to them as well. And it can happen in various ways as they grow. Our kids are growing and developing. They're changing in how they think. They're learning so many different things. They're going through all of those changes of life. I mean, y'all remember puberty and the nightmare that it was. I know I remember it, and I know my emotions were all over the place, and trying to figure out all of that while also trying to stay on top of all of my things with school was incredibly stressful. So how can we help our students when they are showing signs of being burnt out? Well, I like to first look at the reason behind it, what's going on. And oftentimes if we're talking about school, it's either going to be related to load or learning. They're either struggling with the workload that they have, or they're struggling with how to learn different things or how to retain different things. So looking at those two different pieces of it. And I have definitely had to make adjustments with each of my kids for each of those reasons. Let's look at learning. If your student is really getting frustrated with school, or you feel like they're taking forever to get through things, it might be time to look at if they have any additional learning needs that need to be addressed. I have one student who is a quick reader who retains information really easily from things that she reads. And so her level of learning is great when it's that kind of an assignment. Struggles a lot more with things that are related to like math and numbers, and those are things which just take a lot of extra time, and she needs to have different types of information shown to her. She needs to have examples, she needs to have lessons, she needs to be able to write out her notes, she needs to review it. And I know we have to dedicate extra time because she needs to look at math from all of those different angles in order to understand it well. And then I have another one for who visual learning is really his key. Like, he likes to watch things being taught to him. But reading wise, while, he can handle harder reading material, it just takes a lot longer. And being able to kind of suss out the details of things and retain them is more difficult. And so we really had to work on good note-taking skills and how do we go back and review that information. And that's a skill that had to be taught. And I didn't necessarily teach all of it directly. I found resources to help him learn how to study. I developed a couple of resources to help him learn how to study. And then I spent extra time working with him one-on-one. So looking at what they might be struggling with how they learn can be important. If you have a child who's struggling with dyslexia, or they're really having a hard time with math, maybe they have something that's impacting their speech, there are resources out there, and it is worthwhile to look into those different things. If you need to get your child tested and see if you can get additional resources to help them, perhaps a tutor for different subjects, that can be incredibly helpful. I see nothing wrong with hiring a tutor as a homeschool parent. If there is a subject that your student just needs that extra time with, and maybe you're being pulled, maybe you have multiple kids that you're trying to teach and you can't dedicate a huge chunk of your day to just helping one child, you've got to educate all of your other ones as well. So how do you do that? Looking into a tutor or co-op, or trying to find those additional resources to be able to help that child. So while you're still involved in their education and you're still helping them, you've also got like an extra hand coming in and taking some of that workload, so that way you can adequately meet the needs of all of your kids. So that's something to look at. And then the other half of that is looking at their workload. Is their workload just overwhelming them? So our first couple of years of high school and their last year of middle school, my kids definitely had a bigger school load than they do now. And that was because of the courses they were in. We had some courses that were a little bit easier. I knew we were getting into some of those early high school courses where while the work it was a little more challenging than what they'd seen in middle school, it wasn't anywhere near the level of the work they're doing now as juniors and seniors. And so we could balance things a little bit better. And as their coursework has gotten harder, the amount of it I've given them has gotten less because I know that they're going to need additional time to learn that information, to complete those assignments, to write those papers. My daughter's doing college courses, to be able to handle the workload of those college courses. And so adjusting as needed has been something that's been just kind of a natural part of our homeschool and has really helped them avoid feeling too burnt out or too overwhelmed at any one time. You can also adjust schedules with your courses if workload is becoming an issue. There's no reason why you have to do every subject every day. Maybe you just stick to like the big four every day: history, science, math, and English language arts. And those extras that you want to do, health or electives, maybe you're doing different types of studies, maybe you're doing art history, you can put those on one day a week, or you could do it on alternating days. That's something that we did when my kids were taking health and personal finance, for example. This is way back in like 8th grade. We did health lessons 3 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and they did personal finance on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And so they weren't having to do each course every single day. They had a little assignment from each of those on the assigned days. And it took us the whole year to get through both of those courses, but they weren't feeling overwhelmed because we spread it out and we limited how many subjects they were doing on any given day. So make those adjustments to the workload if you feel like that's part of the issue. Customizing curriculum to your student can also be something that can help them avoid burnout. There are some parents who will buy a curriculum brand and they love it and they will use it with every single student, and that might work for their family. I know in our family it does not work. If I tried to use the exact same thing with my second child that I used with my first child, we would both be frustrated the entire year because, again, the way that she learns and retains information is different from what he does. And so rather than feel like I have to just copy, paste, and reuse things for each child, I instead look at what I think will work best for each child individually. Does that end up costing me a little more money because I'm buying different curriculum? Yes, but for me, it's worth it in order to make sure that I have the curriculum that's the right fit for each of my kids. And even when we are using the same curriculum for both kids, what might I need to change from one to the other? For example, like a real life example, we do a lot of guest holo curriculum, right? Which involves books and hands-on activities and like videos and all kinds of things. My oldest would prefer to just read the books. Like, she could care less if she watches any videos. She loves to just dig through the books. Whereas my youngest, he'll read the books, but he'd much prefer the hands-on stuff, the stuff he can make and build and look at and watch and listen to. And so while we're doing the same coursework, maybe I'm assigning fewer of the video hands-on projects to her because that's just not really like her preferred method of learning, but I'm using more of that with him. And so I can make adjustments even within the same curriculum to work for both of them. We've done this with writing. Sometimes we work through some writing things faster. We use a lot of IEW writing programs. And so one might work through it faster than the other, might need just some extra days to get those same assignments done. And so we're still using the same curriculum, but the amount of time I'm giving for those things to be completed is different for the two students based on how they do and what their level of understanding is of that subject. And again, just to make sure that neither of them is feeling too overwhelmed with that. But customizing the curriculum for your students can be really helpful. I have a whole video where I talk about this. I did a whole series on how I do my lesson planning, how I choose curriculum, and I talked pretty extensively about that, about looking at my kids and picking out the curriculum that worked for them. So if you are interested, I will link that video for you if you want to check out kind of how I go about doing that type of planning for my students. Now, particularly when my kids were younger, I found instituting some quiet times was really helpful to avoiding burnout. I usually set these up in the early afternoon, so we've gotten a couple of hours of schoolwork done, and I said, okay, this is like a break period, but it is a quiet break period. You know, we've had lunch, we've run around, we've gotten some energy out and played, but we need to have a period of time where we are simply recollecting ourselves. Just some nice quiet time. They could grab a book to read, they could listen to some music, they could take a nap, but it was quiet time. It doesn't have to be a long period of time. 30 minutes is plenty. Sometimes we would do an hour, but it was a nice chance for them to recharge and kind of reset their brains and give themselves kind of that brain break that we need. You know, if we're going all day long, you get mentally tired, and kids get mentally tired just like adults do. So giving them that little chance to just relax, you know, their brains can sit there and process what they've learned that morning and can feel rested and ready to tackle whatever it is you might still need to do after that break. And again, depending on how long your school days are, maybe you put that quiet time in the later morning hours or the early afternoon hours, or maybe you decide you're going to do it near the end of your school day. But I do find kind of breaking your day in half with it is really helpful. Again, so that way you have that brain break and you avoid that mental fatigue that can happen. So to wrap everything up, burnout happens. It does not matter how long you've been homeschooling. It does not matter if you're a stay-at-home parent or a working parent, if you have one child or if you have 10 children. We can all feel burned out from time to time, and our students can feel burned out from time to time. The trick is to identify when it's happening and to actually make some changes to address it. While I love when people say, well, just remember your why you're homeschooling, and yes, knowing your why you're homeschooling is important, right? That's kind of the background motivation. You also have to do action steps to address it. And I hope I've given you a couple of ideas on ways that you can do that. These are all things that have been tried and true for us. They are things that I have done and that I've had my students do when we have been feeling burnt out. And they are some things that I have done fairly recently when we got into another season of life where I was definitely feeling that extra stress and knew I needed to make changes. So if you have any additional tips that you would like to share, please drop a comment down below. And as always, guys, I appreciate you being here for today's video. I will see you in the next one. Until then, happy homeschooling.